Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest tonight, Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms. Our activist farmer is here with us on Reluctant Preppers to tell us about how to get the entire family engaged so you don't have to go it truly alone as a lead head of your family in getting your family for preparedness. Joel, thank you for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, Dunnigan. It's great to be with you again.
Now, you give a talk on your circuit called How to Work with Your Kids So Your Kids Will Work With You. And you talk about generational farming and really collaborating as a family. A number of people who are head of household and kind of leading the family, sometimes the multi-generational family, in preparedness, even concerns, even being willing to think about or talk about, let alone raise a finger to do anything about working from a life of first world sort of dependency to independent living, would really like to know how to keep the family on the same page so we're all rowing the boat the same direction, so that we're not, dragging our family kicking and screaming into this hard work that sometimes is before us if we want to start taking better care of ourselves and taking care of business. So if you could tell us, what are the wisdom tips that you give to people who want to know how to get your kids to work with you and how to work with them?
Yeah, well, the quickest way to break down something is for there to be disagreement between spouses, and so I'm a big believer in getting on the same page there. If you're not on the same page there, you're never going to get on the same page, with the children, and so the singleness of mission statement. What are we wanting to do? What's our, what are we really after here? You have to be on the same page. And that includes, by the way, dealing with all of the little thorny things like one is a starter and one's a finisher.
Oh yeah.
And if you're a starter, you have a lot of unfinished projects around, and if you're a finisher, all those unfinished projects drive you crazy, and just make it look like everything's cluttered. And so, there has to be some compromises and some understanding there. But anyway, the idea here is that you and your significant other, you've got to get on the same page as far as what you want to do, and what projects are the most important to do, and then. The amazing thing about kids is that they generally get drawn magnetically and inherently to things that mom and dad are passionate about. I mean, that's just family function 101,
I'm thinking of the scene where I was standing on a ladder with a circular saw, cutting the header of my garage door higher and reinforcing it so we could get our new bought conversion van to fit into the too small of a garage door, and my 3-year-old son come walking on the driveway saying, "Daddy, I want to use the big saw." And I say, "It's really, really hard. It's really dangerous. I want to do the hard job," he said. So.
Yeah. They are drawn naturally to wanting to do what excites us, what floats our boat, what they see us doing. For them to not be interested in it is aberrant. Not that your kids are always going to follow in your footsteps or anything like that, but something isn't quite right when when the kids don't want to be drawn to it. Now, several little ways that you can make that happen, just besides being excited about it, is to make the different projects and the different jobs competitive in nature, where you turn into games instead of chores. And so one way is instead of go out and pick beans, well, let's put a piece of pink survey tape from this bean plant to that bean plant, and then another row from this bean plant to that bean plant. And of course, you're obviously, along with this is all age specific. I mean, obviously, if I'm the parent and I'm going to pick beans, I'm going to make my distance between pink ribbons farther than that's going to be for a 5-year-old. Okay, but the point is to put your 2 pink ribbons on. There's a nice clear goal there, and let's see who can finish first. And so you turn. Kids love games. I mean, kids and games go together like, like peanut butter and jelly. So, turn that into a game, and they can look up and see their ribbon. They can see your ribbon, and they can kind of see what's going along. Probably one of the most significant things that I think is important on this is to make task-oriented tasks and not time-oriented tasks. By that, I mean, you never say, go pull weeds in the garden for 30 minutes. If you say go pull weeds in the garden for 30 minutes, think about that. There's no incentive for doing a good job. There's no incentive in hurrying. There's no incentive to get done what's done. I mean, you have to put in your time. So if I do 5 feet in 30 minutes, I get no more incentive, anything than if I do, 10 feet in 30 minutes.
Yeah, it shuts off all the creativity to come up with methods
Sure.
and approaches that are going to be more efficient too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do the same thing with, go practice the piano for 30 minutes. We do this time-oriented stuff all the time. And so what we need to do is make it task-oriented, where there is an incentive for completion. That's what I'm trying to get at, where you incentivize completion and efficiency, obviously. So the reward for, go out and weed the green beans. I guess I'm stuck on green beans tonight. Weed the beans from here to there, and if it takes you 10 minutes, great. If it takes you an hour, that's fine, but you've got to weed them from here to here. And when you get done, the reward is not, oh, you finished early, go weed some more. That's not the reward. The reward is something that's tangible. It could be money. It could be time, like reading a story. It could be recreation. We'll go fishing or go for a swim or food. I mean, there could be any number of proper rewards. But the point is that you reward completion. I got to tell you a story about this. Early on in the early years, Daniel was, 3 years old, and he would go out with me. And in those days, we didn't have a post drive or anything, and to build fence. And we were, I remember one spring we were building replacing a piece of boundary fence with the neighbor, and so I was going up every morning and trying to get in, about 15 or 20 posts in the morning. And so Daniel would go with me, and he'd bring his little, Tonka trucks and stuff, and he'd play there in the dirt, and I'd work along. Well, one of the ways that I push myself in such a situation is say, well, I'm not going to stop for a drink of water until, I do 2 more posts or 1 more, or whatever. So you deny yourself a little bit of gratification, and it kind of stimulates you to get done so you can get your drink of water. So we're going along, and of course, as a 3-year-old is wont to do, he starts to whine, oh, Daddy, I'm thirsty. No, Daniel, we can't stop. We can't have a drink of water. I'm not going to get a drink till I finish. I don't do that next post. And so anyway, so he kind of grew up this way. So along about 9 years old, what do all 9-year-old boys need? They need to go out and build a fort, right? They got to go out and build a fort. We had a neighbor boy here the same age in the neighborhood, and the 2 boys got together, and they decided they had to go build a fort. So they were going to build it at the neighbor's place, and so the appointed day came. We're going to build the fort. And so, Daniel left in the morning and went over to the neighbor's place, and about an hour and a half later, the mother called of the neighbor boy. The mother called. She says, What is it with your son? He won't let my son have a drink of water until they finish that east wall.
Oh my!
But they say more is caught than taught. And I remember well our daughter Rachel, when she was about 10, she and a couple little girlfriends started a little newsletter, with subscriptions of about 5 people, and it came around for Thanksgiving. Well, so everybody had to write a little piece. What are you thankful for? And you know what her piece was? I mean, she was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years old. Her piece was, I'm thankful for work, because think of the chaos and confusion our world would have if it weren't for work. And, our kids aren't perfect. But I'll tell you what, both of them have an incredible work ethic. And I think a lot of it is because Teresa and I, we're hard workers, and we work efficiently, and we appreciate work well done, and doing some of these principles where it was always task oriented, never time oriented. It taught our kids, hey, you work hard and you can get done early. Then you can look back at what you did, and you can go read a book. You can be done early. The whole idea here is efficiency. Think how we can get this done quickly. Stay with it. Don't take a nap. Don't go lollygagging. Stay with it and get it done early. And that right there, that one principle, can make huge differences in the work ethic, and just the spirit, the spirit and attitude with which kids look at work.
What about the size of the task? If it seems overwhelming, how do you break it down so that people feel like I can really accomplish this? They can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, well, of course, the old song about how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. And so there's where you make lists. You break it down. You might have this great big goal up here, but you make all the little pieces part of a list. Teresa and I are both list makers. She's a lot better list maker than I am, even, and our kids are list makers, especially our daughter. And boy, I mean, she's got Post-it notes and lists all over the place. And Teresa, my wife, is such a great list maker that if she gets to the end of the day and she had to do something that wasn't on the list, she puts it on the list so she can cross it off.
I do that too.
And yeah, and so when you have a big project, a big thing, you don't put down the big project. You might create that as a heading. But, think about like United Way goals or a church building project or any kind of fundraising thing. How they make how they'll have the goal up here at the top of a thermometer, and then they gradually ink in the increments going up to it. And you have to, you have to have something to mark off. You have to have completion points. This is the whole point of Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey.
Yes, sir.
He says, don't start with the biggest debt, start with the smallest one. You list all your debts, start with your smallest one. Why? Because satisfaction encourages, incentivizes more action. And so when you can mark one off, that incentivizes the completion. So if you're going to build a solarium on the side of the house, don't just say, well, we're going to build a solarium on the side of the house. Well, you can say that, but then what you want is a list. All right, we're going to, first of all, number one is agree on the dimensions. All right, number two, agree on the materials. All right, I mean, this is all just planning stuff, but you actually mark off and you come to agreement on those kinds of things. And the discussion, the build up, the planning and build up to this thing. I mean, kids, even very small kids, can get sucked into something like this when this kind of discussion involves them. And that's another one of my principles is that I think that we don't expect much from our kids. And I mean, when you think about historically, I mean, the bar mitzvah was at 12. That's when a Jewish boy becomes a man. 12-year-old. How many people with 12-year-olds could trust them to be a man? Buffalo Bill Cody was on the Pony Express when he was 13. He was 13, ran the Pony Express. I mean, he was a 13-year-old carrying a pistol, a Colt revolver, U.S. mail through hostile, Indian territory on a horse, 13 years old. I mean, think about the judgment, the skill, the goodness gracious, all a 13-year-old. And so we have deprived our children from really meaningful visceral interactions with the adult world. We call that child abuse, or child exploitation when kids work. And in my book, Folks, This Ain't Normal, the whole first chapter, I start out with the abnormality of a society where kids don't have chores. I mean, think about the chores that kids used to have. Fill the wood box, draw water, have water for mama. At the wood stove, milk the cow, obviously plant garden. The old timers around here tell me that two of the earliest chores for boys was first of all in the winter to trap a raccoon or a possum or a skunk or something, squirrel, to trap it and take it to the chicken yard and take their knife and slit up its stomach so the chickens could have fresh animal protein in the wintertime when there weren't bugs and crickets around. It kept the chickens healthy and kept them laying eggs. And that was a one day a week thing. 1 day a week, the boy was responsible for getting something trapped and into the house. The other one was to go out in the barnyard with a wheelbarrow and pick up the cow pies that the cows dropped in the barnyard and wheel it into the barn and straw it down with straw, so you'd have good deep bedding with fertilizer, so that those cow pies outside didn't just get leached away in the winter rain and lose them, because that was important fertility. But these were all chores. You read these 1900 books, of things that children did, and very, very powerful. I mean, the idea that a child is a liability today, we see statistics, how much it costs, what a child costs. Well, it's a crazy economy if children are a cost to the household. Children should be an asset to the household. And if your household is operating so that children are a cost, a liability, a cost, liability, and expense to the household, then the household needs to flip around a little bit and be creative enough so that these children can be an asset to the household.
Yeah, ironically, you talked in the past about how some of the things that we're doing are creating the illness, and we need to be our own remedy for the illness. And this is a good example. People talk about children these days don't know responsibility, and they expect to be and so entitled, and it's like, but we're reaping the fruits from the seeds that we sow there, and you have to start sowing different seeds. What are you saying?
Well, yeah, responsibility is like a muscle, and if you don't exercise that muscle, you're not going to have any responsibility. And so if we expect nothing from the kids, all we expect them to do is sit on an iPhone in the back seat and play games. That's not going to be. Then we wonder, why they don't sail when they become adult in size, and they don't sail. They fail to launch. Why? Because they've not exercised that responsibility muscle for good decision making. Which brings me to another point, and that is, we are big believers in child entrepreneurship. And I speak routinely at the Home Educators Association of Virginia, HEAV, and I do one of these seminars that we're discussing right now. I do one on child entrepreneurship. And one of the funnest parts of that seminar, every time I do it, is I just ask for just quick popcorn, send it back to me. People to belt out entrepreneurial things that kids under 16 are doing, okay? And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable from pet sitting to to, of course, the old standby, lawn mowing, snow shoveling, but you would be amazed. You'd be amazed at the entrepreneurial things that young people do. So I know for me, I started my first chickens when I was 10 years old, and so here's the thing: when I say child entrepreneur, I mean child entrepreneur. It's not mom and dad vicariously reliving something that they didn't get to do. We're talking about autonomous childhood things. Now, that doesn't mean that you have no oversight over your 10-year-old. What it does mean is that you have very, very limited oversight, and so they have to sink and swim. You're not going to sit here and say, you better go out and take care of your chickens or they're going to die. No. When those chickens become sick and die, that'll be a really important lesson for you. And when they cease to be profitable, that'll be a really important lesson for you. You'll find out that profits don't just grow on trees. And so at 10, Dad, in his wisdom, allowed me to do this chicken business. And when somebody came and a relative or a friend or somebody from church or whatever, hey, I want to see your chickens, Dad would say, well, not mine, or Joel's. He's a guru. And so I'd take him around and show him my chickens. And so when our kids came along, Daniel started his rabbits when he was 8, and that was his business. And all through, growing up, he had his business. When people come and they're interested in the rabbits, I don't know anything about rabbits. Daniel's the rabbit guru, and he's become actually a national leader on pastured rabbits now, and sells breeding stock and has quite a following, with people asking questions and things. So and what that does is it gives incredible self-affirmation. At the end of the day, what it does to a child, and when I say child, I mean anywhere from 6 to 15, 16. What it does to a child to have to self-actualize as the boss of something, as the king of something, as the CEO of something, is so much more powerful than being the top points getter on Angry Birds, because you know how to do something, or you know how to make something, you know how to fix something, and so there's so many wonderful principles that come through with being in business for yourself, and whether you're in an urban setting or a rural setting, there are tons and tons and tons of opportunity out there for being in business. When Rachel came along, she started making these little hand-woven pot holders, on these little elastic loom things.
Sure.
And the material cost about 25 cents a little pot holder. She sold them for $2. Well, a little 6-7-year-old cherubic, who cannot say, yes, I'll buy 5 of them, And so she was real artistic, and so she put these beautiful color schemes together and had quite a thriving business. And then she started making pound cakes and zucchini bread. And boy, I remember one day at Farmer's Market, I was standing there, she was with me. She was probably, 10 maybe. And this lady came by, and she just made all over Rachel. Oh, are you the one? Because Rachel hadn't been there the previous week when the lady had bought one of her zucchini bread. And she served it at her garden club, that week. And then here Rachel was at Farmer's Market. The lady came out. Oh, are you the girl that made the lady that made the zucchini bread? The lady, Rachel's 10. Zucchini bread for the garden club. It says the best zucchini bread they've ever had. Blah 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 blah. That's real stuff. That is real stuff. And what that does to the psyche, to the encouragement, to the whatever, to the the self-awareness and affirmation of anybody. I mean, adults thrive on that, let alone kids. And so that kind of direct, purposeful, and needful interaction with the adult world is priceless for kids. We too often we don't make a platform. We don't purposely make a platform in which those kids can interact meaningfully with adults. But it's that adult world interaction, meaningful interaction, not make work, not silly stuff, not sideshow, but true, meaningful interaction that really fires up, a child. And so, both of our kids, when they were 20 years old, had $20,000 in the bank, and we never gave a what do you call it?
Allowance.
Well, yeah, we don't believe in allowances. Nobody should get an allowance. Nobody should get paid for breathing. And by the same token, there are things I think that you should get paid for. You should not get paid for, like cleaning up your room, putting your dirty clothes in the laundry. Those are things that you do because you're part of the household, part of the family, part of the function. And there again, getting paid for everything or getting little, stars for everything, I think can sometimes create an entitlement idea that everything I do should be compensated. Well, you and I know as adults, there are a lot of things we do that don't get compensation, like, cleaning the toilet, running the vacuum cleaner. We don't get paid for that, but we do it because it's part of the necessary functioning of humanity. And I think that there's a strength in separating, in requiring things to be done because this is what it takes for the household to run smoothly, and then here's your fiefdom, here's your autonomous deal, and it's your compensation. Now, when the kids had their businesses and they were earning their money, of course, Teresa and I were good, bankers for them if they needed a loan or whatever. And then as they became profitable and successful, then, in their teens and had all this money in the bank, then Teresa and I could borrow money from them for the farm, when we needed it. It kind of worked out that way. But it's their money. It's their money. And sometimes they spend it on things that we thought was frivolous. Well, that's okay. That's good. Do your frivolous spending when you're young and don't have a lot of responsibilities. How many people hit married life and they're still spending frivolously? Get that out of your system when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old and find out that things don't satisfy, and keeping up with the Joneses is a pretty tough road to hoe. And get that out of your system early, so that when you hit adulthood, you have a more exercised, well-rounded, eclectic decision-making model. So parents, think about different projects, different things that can be done, and then let those be entrepreneurial things. You'd be amazed what happens when the family flock of chickens becomes Jill's. And Jill is, 10 years old, and that becomes her chickens. And instead of the family rabbitry, those become Michael's rabbits, okay? And that patch of garden right there, if you will grow that 10 by 10 square, here's what we'll pay per pound for, green beans, beets, carrots, and suddenly those kids, instead of doing chores or doing, mom and dad's whatever stuff, it becomes theirs. They have ownership. They become stakeholders, and they rise or fall, on their own measure, on their own diligence and perseverance.
That's brilliant. I never connected the dots there. I've been a real proponent of employee ownership. You never had to get the pirates motivated to work hard or to take on risks or whatever because they knew that they had a full stake in the outcome of the venture. And
Yes.
companies that make sure that they're that all the people that work there are part owners of the company. They don't have to sit there and have pep rallies to get people motivated for this latest campaign or this project because they all know that the betterment of their situation is intrinsically and inherently, organically part of their motivation. Just flows naturally to that. We're wired for that. But I never thought about that in this regard. If you want the kids to go out and pick the garden or whatever, we then make it their garden and buy the stuff off of them. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the same is true for other projects. I mean, for example, I told you our daughter's very artistic, so so we've had her design things, do things. We pay her for that. Okay, she's real gifted at it, and you pay. Maybe you have a child that's really a geek. Okay, well, maybe you're trying to go. Let's just say you're trying to go off grid. Okay, and so what's that worth to you? What would it be worth to you to go off grid? Would it be worth $2,000, $3,000? Okay. Well, tell that 16-year-old geek son or daughter, you research it, you come up with the best option, give us the alternatives and the why, and when the project is installed, we'll pay you $2,000 to sleuth it, figure it out, and decide the best alternative for us. When it's installed, we pay you for all of your sleuthing and design work. I mean, that suddenly becomes because many parents I've got all sorts of things around here that I would like to do, but I'm not going to live long enough to do them. And so incentivizing, especially as kids get older, 14, 15, 16, 17, man, researching stuff on the internet, making calls, being make your family into a business, even if it's, just something for fun. The XYZ, I'm calling on behalf of the XYZ business here in Chattanooga, and we're looking at, and let them run with it. I mean, the drama, the personal satisfaction, it's just really powerful. Another element here that I would be remiss if I didn't come in at this point and say, this all sounds wonderful, but I can hear the parents in the background saying, yeah, but what if they mess up? I mean,
Yeah, I kind of saw the electric arcs happening during the off-grid solar installation there.
Yeah, well, I didn't say there isn't any oversight, but I am saying, release them, and incentivize them. And so, what about these bent over nails? What about these, boards that are cut crooked or whatever? And all I can say there is you have to get over it. And I can be very, very personal on this. My dad was a journeyman pattern maker at Delco Remy, which was a subcontractor to Chevrolet back, before World War II, and that was in the day when they actually made wooden patterns to pour like carburetor molds into and engine molds. They would make these wooden molds, and then they would pour the castings in, and then that lead casting became the template then then they'd pour thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And so, if you think about making a wooden carburetor, talk about exacting specifications. And so what I'm getting at is Dad was a master woodworker. He could build furniture. He could build tables, grandfather clocks. He built our cribs for us kids. We still have it. It's unbelievable. He could build anything. I, on the other hand, am totally function. If it works, I don't care what it looks like. I've always told Teresa, I'd love to build a house, but you wouldn't want to live in the house that I built. I've got all these ideas, for underground and putting the toilet on top of a biogas chamber, all this stuff. But it would be it would be an amazing house, but it would not be pretty. It would be more like a barn, kind of a people barn. and yet, with this, disparity between father-son, I can never remember him making fun, complaining, or being short. Some of the first things on a farm, what are some of the first things you do? Well, you build a gate, for the corral or something like that. And of course, I built these chicken shelters. I started with my chickens, and I was building these chicken shelters, when I was 12 and 13 years old. And I could never cut a 90-degree angle. I couldn't make a saw cut. This was before circle saws. All you had was a carpenter saw. I couldn't make that saw cut straight. Everything was, crooked. Gates were, hung, 3 shades to the wind. But they swung and they worked. And you know what? The cows never complained. Maybe that's one reason why I like animals so much. If you look at our barn roof, it looks like the waves of the ocean, well, partly it's because, we use pole rafters instead of, dressed rafters from Lowe's, because we're doing it yourself. But you know what? I've never had a cow, a pig, a chicken. I've never had an animal complain about my carpentry. I've never had them complain about my 87-degree angles. Never had them complain about anything. And you know what? Dad didn't either. And I run into many, many, many adults. When I go down this road, you'll see a 50-year-old, big old burly man, tears start trickling down his cheeks. Because you know what? All he remembers all his life is, it was never good enough.
Being corrected, yeah.
Yep, never good enough. And so one of my big points is praise, praise, praise. Stephen Covey, in his classic 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about emotional equity being a gas tank. It's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. He says every one of us we have a gas tank with our spouse, our kids, our co-workers, our friends. We have this emotional gas tank with them, and we're either putting gas in, or we're pulling gas out. And you have to have enough emotional equity gas in other people's tank that you can make an occasional withdrawal. Because you know what? You and I are human, and we're going to say an unfit word, an unkind word, an incorrect word. We're going to have a wrong perception sometimes of something. We're going to jump to a conclusion. We're human. We're going to make a mistake, and we're going to make a withdrawal. And of course, the most critical withdrawal, of course, is the one with your spouse or with your kids, right? And you've got to have enough equity in that tank that you can make a withdrawal occasionally without shipwrecking the relationship. And so if you have praised your kids enough and not been a complainer, a whiner, good enough is perfect. Good enough is perfect. It is perfect. Good enough is perfect. And if you've been an encourager like that, you can make a correction every now and then and make that emotional withdrawal and still be fine and get along well. But if all the child hears is correction, 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 and no praise when it's done well, you'll never get enough equity in that gas tank to make a withdrawal.
Well, Joel, before we let you go, is there any other major topic that we've left unturned in this idea of how you get your family and your children engaged with you on these otherwise onerous preparedness tasks?
Well, I'd say the only other thing maybe that we didn't touch as hard as I'd like to touch it is just bring your kids into your world. I think so many times we assume that the kids aren't interested in our world, that we just let them be in their world. We don't go out of our way to involve them in our world. And the truth is that kids have great ideas because you know what? They haven't done it this way all their life. And I know that as we started here with the farm and as our kids got a little older, 10, 11, 12 years old, it was absolutely epiphanal. You wouldn't believe the number of good ideas that the kids had about things, about the business, about the farm, about what we should do. When Teresa and I are wrestling over something, and from the mouth of babes comes this tremendous observation, this truth, and you go, why didn't I think of that? And it's very, very powerful. And I think that we as parents, if there's one thing that we kind of universally lack, I would say good parents. And we all know parents that don't give a care about their kids, and the parents are off on crack. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about good families, functional families. I think if there's one thing as universal as anything, it is that we don't assume early enough that the kids have a significant contribution. And I think that's a big mistake. That's a big mistake. And we need to, it's better to bring the kids in on the discussions and the planning and the working it out earlier than later. We see this routinely. For example, butchering chickens. I'll just move there for a moment. We've actually taken some heat out there, in the world, with people. You shouldn't allow 8-year-olds to see chicken processing, dead chickens, whatever, slicing throats and blood and guts and all that stuff. And what we have found and we've been at this decades, what we have found is that up until about 10 or 11 years old, we have never seen a child flinch from that. It's just they just participate in it. They get into it, and it just is. At Mother Earth News fairs, there for 3 or 4 years, Dave Schaefer and I did this, chicken evisceration thing, and we would actually get the kids up on stage with us and let them pull heads and clap for them when they got the head pulled off and stuff. And little kids love this. But if you don't get them at that point, by the time they're about 12, something happens. 11, 12, 13, something happens. That child, mystique, just curiosity and openness, it starts to close in. It starts to become calloused, and they start to be concerned about what they look like and what their friends are saying and all this stuff, and what the Kardashians would do and that sort of thing, and suddenly you've lost them. And so that's one reason why I'm such a huge believer in child gardens. Out there at 5, 6, and in diapers, they should be out there with you. Now they can't do a lot, but they should be out there with you. Don't shelter them. Involve them as adults. Don't talk to them don't sit there and jabber and talk. Use use words. Use one of the funnest ones was Daniel. One time we got up from Thanksgiving dinner, and Daniel pushes back from the table. He says, "Oh, I think I overindulged." It was the wrong word, overindulged. But the point was, at 6 years old, he knew the word. He knew this, and we always talked to the kids like they were adults. And assumed that they were part and parcel of our world. I won't belabor it more, but you see what I'm getting at. And I think that the most common mistake in good families is that we just assume, well, it's my world and their world, and they're not interested in my world. And the fact is, they are fascinated by our world. And the sooner we draw them into it, make them a part of it, let them participate in it, the more they'll start exercising those responsibility muscles, those dependability muscles, and they'll become the best sidekick we could ever have.
That's an awesome send-off for us, Joel. Thank you so much. It reminded me, as you talked about that whole last section, about some of the virtues of not just homeschooling, which is a perfect opportunity, but anytime you can work shoulder to shoulder with your kids and let them get involved in your things. And you talked about that early start, because the world, people worry about socialization, but a lot of the socialization that's out there, if it's unchecked, can kind of dumb them down and get them more worried about peer pressure and everything, and loss of confidence in themselves, rather than their natural. Kids are naturally curious, naturally confident, naturally wanting to accomplish things. So, catch them while that spark is still alive, and fan that into an ember of a flame. So, Joel, thank you so much again for joining us on Reluctant Preppers and talking with us about how to get your children engaged and willingly work with you on preparedness.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be with you. Plant. And of course, you're obviously, along with this is all age specific. I mean, obviously, if I'm the parent and I'm going to pick beans, I'm going to make my distance between pink ribbons farther than that's going to be for a 5-year-old. Okay. But the point is to put your 2 pink ribbons on. There's a nice clear goal there, and let's see who can finish first. And so kids love games. I mean, kids and games go together like peanut butter and jelly. So turn that into a game, and they can look up and see their ribbon. They can see your ribbon, and they can kind of see what's going along. Probably one of the most significant things that I think is important on this is to make task-oriented tasks and not time-oriented tasks. By that, I mean, you never say, go pull weeds in the garden for 30 minutes. If you say go pull weeds in the garden for 30 minutes, and just make it look like everything's cluttered. And so, there has to be some compromises and some understanding there. But anyway, the idea here is that you and your significant other, you've got to get on the same page as far as what you want to do, and what projects are the most important to do. And then the amazing thing about kids is that they generally get drawn magnetically and inherently to things that mom and dad are passionate about. I mean, that's just family function 101,
I'm thinking of the scene where I was standing on a ladder with a circular saw, cutting the header of my garage door higher and reinforcing it so we could get our new bought conversion van to fit into the too small of a garage door. And my 3-year-old son come walking on the driveway saying, "Daddy, I want to use the big saw." And I say, "It's really, really hard. It's really dangerous. I want to do the hard job," he said. So. Yeah. They are drawn naturally to wanting to do what excites us, what floats our boat, what they see us doing. For them to not be interested in it is aberrant. Not that your kids are always going to follow in your footsteps or anything like that, but something isn't quite right when when the kids don't want to be drawn to it. Now, several little ways that you can make that happen
just besides being excited about it, is to make the different projects and the different jobs competitive in nature, where you turn them into games instead of chores. And so one way is instead of go out and pick beans. Well, let's put a piece of pink survey tape from this bean plant to that bean plant, and then another row from this bean plant to that bean.
Give to people who want to know how to get your kids to work with you and how to work with them.
Yeah, well, the quickest way to break down something is for there to be disagreement between spouses. And so I'm a big believer in getting on the same page there. If you're not on the same page there, you're never going to get on the same page, with the children. And so the singleness of mission statement. What are we wanting to do? What's our what are we really after here? You have to be on the same page, and that includes, by the way, dealing with all of the little thorny things like one is a starter and one's a finisher.
Oh yeah.
And if you're a starter, you have a lot of unfinished projects around, and if you're a finisher, all those unfinished projects drive you crazy.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest tonight, Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms. Our activist farmer is here with us on Reluctant Preppers to tell us about how to get the entire family engaged so you don't have to go it truly alone as a lead head of your family in getting your family for preparedness. Joel, thank you for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, Dunnigan. It's great to be with you again.
Now, you give a talk on your circuit called How to Work with Your Kids so Your Kids will work with you, and you talk about generational farming and really collaborating as a family. A number of people who are head of household and kind of leading the family, sometimes the multi-generational family, in preparedness, even concerns, even being willing to think about or talk about, let alone raise a finger to do anything about working from a life of first world sort of dependency to independent living, would really like to know how to keep the family on the same page so we're all rowing the boat the same direction, so that we're not dragging our family kicking and screaming into this hard work that sometimes is before us if we want to start taking better care of ourselves and taking care of business. So if you could tell us, what are the wisdom tips that you